Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to my medieval cooking party. I am the creative Contessa, and today we're going to be going back to 15th century Naples to explore not just one recipe, but 1.5 recipes, basically, of that show us how very much Italian cuisine has really changed drastically over the years, the centuries, in fact. So let me just make sure that I can see all of you and your messages. Yes, excellent. Okay. And just so you all know, I'm taking a break from my contacts, which means I can't really see the chat at all. So hopefully my moderator will be communicating any relevant comments, but if I don't say hello, it's because I literally can't see you. Yeah, my eyes need a break every so often. So, and I don't have medieval spectacles, and so, I don't want to ruin the look for everyone. So we'll start with my usual getting dressed while I discuss what it is we're going to be looking at today. So we are returning once more to what is a collection of recipes that is colloquially referred to as the Neapolitan recipe collection. Now, this is it's from a source from the mid 15th century, and it's tied to Naples. It actually contains a lot of recipes that are both Italian and Catalan, because there were massive ties, cultural ties, between the court of Naples, the kingdom of Naples, and several of the mainland Spanish kingdoms, including Aragon. Because in this era, the king of Naples is actually King Ferrante, and King Ferrante is the natural son of the king of Aragon, Alfonso. I don't remember which of the Alfonsos he was. Maybe the fifth. Don't hold me to that. One of the Alfonsos of Aragon. Anyway, Alfonso conquers the kingdom of Aragon from the Angevins, who had been ruling Naples. As is often the case, many kingdoms throughout Europe end up with rulers who are not actually native to their lands. England ends up with Danes and Norwegians and Normans and Germans and Welsh. And, Spain ends up with Austrians and French, and Aragon ends up with French and then Spanish rulers. So it just seems like no one can stay where they're actually born to rule, I guess, is the lesson that we've learned. In any case, this means that the court in Naples changes its affiliations from being more French-leaning culturally and linguistically to being more Spanish to Iberian Peninsula leaning. And this can actually be seen, it is actually reflected in the food of the era. So this collection contains recipes that would have been familiar to people living in 15th century Barcelona, for instance, or Valencia. And so it's, further evidence of just how international the, medieval Europe actually was, of how interconnected it was, of how things didn't just stay in one place, how while there were local regional specialties, those weren't the only kinds of dishes that people in any given region enjoyed. And in fact, I was reading through this 15th century cheese travel vlog last night, and our Pantaleone, our cheese connoisseur and lover, says that in Antwerp, at the cheese market in Antwerp, there are a great many English cheeses that are for sale, and that English cheeses are exported to a wide variety of places, which I honestly would not have expected to read. So, further evidence that this myth of people were born and died within 5 miles of the same place is not necessarily true at all, and that they never ever left their village. Not true. Not at all. Just further evidence of that. Anyway, so we're going to be making today, we're going to be going back to actually Lenten food, because Lent is not the only time of the year in the medieval calendar when people would actually fast. There were like 130 days a year, basically, in the medieval calendar, medieval Christian calendar, in which people would fast. And fasting meant no meat, no eggs, no cheese, hypothetically no cheese. Some of those days were called ember days. And so the dish we're making today is one of those kinds of dishes that you could eat on such a day of fasting. It is actually basically, it's referred to in another source as a fava bean omelet. It's a vegan omelet, honestly. But in this source, it's actually referred to as a broad bean fritter. In this case, fava beans are broad beans. So we're actually going to be making broad bean fritters today. I have over here on the stove, bubbling away quite happily in my traditional Korean clay pot. Broad beans are cooking. And for this recipe, we're actually going to need to make a spice blend that is called fine spices. And I was very happy to find an actual recipe for fine spices in a Venetian cookbook from the 14th century. So it was because otherwise when we encounter in these recipes things like fine spices, sweet spices, good spices, strong spices, it doesn't then tell you what those are. So it seems that there might have been a general understanding of spice blends and that there were just some common spice blends in medieval European cuisine, the same way there are spice blends in cuisines all over the world, even to this day. Think about Moroccan food, think about Indian food. Chinese has Chinese 5-spice, right? So medieval people also had their favorite spice blends. And I can almost guarantee you that just like masala, garam masala specifically, that garam masala in Indian cuisine is not the same between any household. I've talked to many Indian cooks, and they all have different recipes for their garam masala. And I'm pretty certain it was the same. There were some key components in these spice blends, but each cook might have their own secret combination or their own preferred combination even. So I found one that might have been the fine spices that are indicated in this recipe. In any case, we know it is a fine spice mixture that could have been used in this recipe. So we'll be making the fine spice mixture first, and then our bean fritters.
Brandon, Thomakor, Susan, Ursel, and Jug Life.
Oh, Brandon, Thomakor, Susan, Ursel, Jug Life, thank you for joining us today. Cassandra. Yeah, thank you for joining us today. Welcome. So I'm just finishing the getting dressed process. And then we will be using today, we will be going back to our comically large mortar. And we will be chopping up our herbs, and we'll be frying. We'll be engaging in some shallow frying today because these fritters are fried in oil. Doesn't say what kind of oil. We'll talk about that. But this is a very tasty dish, and it is absolutely vegan depending on the kind of oil you use. And they are very tasty. And I haven't tried them. You might be able to make them up in advance and take them with you to an event, actually. That is entirely likely. They would be very shelf stable because there's not much in them that would go bad. The things that might go bad in them might be the fruit that is in them, but that would take several days. So they would be a pretty shelf stable option for you to take to an event and not have to worry about it being too severely refrigerated for safety reasons. Okay, so let's go ahead and put on our bling, because I'm, just because I'm a Contessa in the kitchen doesn't mean I can't look nice. And I apologize for the difficulties we've had streaming over these last several days. There have been gremlins fighting me at almost every turn when it comes to doing these live streams. It has been remarkable. Unfortunately, I have some very sad news. It looks like Philip from Irish Medieval History will not be joining us for any live streams for the next month or more, unless something changes. Unfortunately, YouTube is not rewarding him for live streaming. So it's not pushing the live stream on his channel. He's not earning any money from it. And, it takes up a pretty large amount of his time. So he's going to focus his efforts in other directions. And then hopefully YouTube will pull its head out of its ass and let him actually start earning money from the effort that he puts forth. So we will be doing more sewing parties with just me, but I have an exciting announcement to make. I have been contacted by a woman who's a lady who specializes in researching. She is a therapist professionally, but she has also been researching the history of mental health care and therapy. And so I'm going to have her on the channel in a month when I get back from Thailand. And we're going to do 2 separate streams together. We're going to do one stream where we just talk about, it's going to be a medieval sewing party where we talk about mental health care in the Middle Ages. And then the next week, we're actually going to do an immersive live stream where I go full 15th century Contessa, and she's actually going to be my 15th century therapist. And we're actually going to demonstrate for you how therapy may have actually worked in the 15th century. So if you're excited, if you'd like to see what that's about, tune at the end of May. I haven't scheduled them yet I scheduled them on my calendar. I haven't actually set them up yet, so keep your eye on that. Make sure to hit the notification bell, and then it will let you know when we've gone live. Okay, brilliant. Brilliant. And I said this earlier, but for whatever reason, it is very hard for me to see the chat. Yep. Okay. Because my eyes needed a break from my contacts, and I can barely see the screen because of the lights, and the live chat is definitely. I'm going to assume though that the screen is probably a little glamour glary. Oh, we don't have. Okay. There we go. That should be better. Okay, well, let us get down to brass tacks. The first thing we're going to do today is make one of these medieval spice blends. Now, this fine spice blend that we're going to be making. So for those who are looking for resources that are easy to allow you to get into medieval cookery, I can highly recommend the Medieval Kitchen recipes from France and Italy. What I love about this source is that it has good introductory chapters with lots of very good and useful information about not just medieval cooking, but medieval dining. It sets this whole activity, this whole endeavor in a good historical context. It's highly dependent on primary sources or on transcriptions and translations of primary sources. In fact, it only works from original medieval recipes. So they also provide, for every recipe, they provide the original or the translation of the original, and then their modern redaction of it. So you can, if you want, just straight up cook their recipes. You don't have to do your own recreation, but if you want to check their work, so to say, you can. There are also in the back, there's a whole bunch of recipes that have been published in their original language. All the recipes they do are published in the back in the original language, so that if you really, if you're a translator like me, you want to check their work, you can. All right, so I love this in particular. What? Oh, thank you.
It looks very cute.
Yeah, okay. I didn't want a curly Q on the top of my head. Okay,
And
right.
Did you explain what type of dress you're wearing?
Oh, no, I haven't explained what type of dress I'm wearing. Right, so first off, today we're doing 15th century Italian cuisine, and that is why I am therefore dressed in 15th century Italian attire. This is specifically Florentine, specifically 1470s to 1490s. So, and I'm only wearing my cotta and a camicia. If I were to go outside, I really should put a third and or fourth layer on top of this. This would be called maybe a kuffia or a couvre-chef in French or a kerchief in English. And so I'm really dressed for casual at-home wear. I'm not dressed to go outside. My hair hasn't been done in some kind of fancy form, right? If I wanted to put on if I were to go out, I should put on a layer like this one. And I'm not going to, because we're in the kitchen, and that's silk. That's silk damask lined in silk taffeta. So no, I'm not going to put that on and demonstrate it in this kitchen where there's lots of foodstuffs that could easily leave permanent stains on that.
And they will leap from the counter.
And they will leap from the counter onto it. In fact, it wouldn't surprise me if that is now covered in saffron somehow. So, yeah. Okay. So
what makes it specifically Florentine?
What makes it specifically Florentine? Okay, that's a good question. The shapes. So the waistline being here, this V opening, the actually relatively modest neckline. You'll notice there isn't really any cleavage showing here, contrary to what people imagine there is. There isn't. This style of sleeve is particularly sort of Florentine, Northern Europe. But this is copied directly from portraits from that part of the world. And yes, so there were some neighboring city-states that also dressed similar to this. But in Venice, for instance, the necklines are much less modest. And the waists get much, much higher, much, much higher. Yeah. So there's a couple of things that make this particularly Florentine. And also the fact that I've copied this directly off of Florentine portraits, not portraits from Naples, not portraits from Rome, not portraits from Venice, for instance. But yeah, there's a specific sleeve style and bodice style, and also the skirts being sort of having this A-frame, this flare out like that. That's all very Florentine. If you start studying fashion across the Italian peninsula in the 15th century, decade by decade, you'll develop an eye. You'll just be able to tell, oh, well, that's actually from Ravenna. That's actually from Venice. That's from Bologna. And in fact, when I went to Bologna dressed like this, but with my top layer, I went to Bologna dressed like this, and one of the store clerks semi-jokingly suggested that the next time I come back to Siena, I should not be dressed like a Florentine. There's a long, nasty political history there, but that was long ago political history, actually. But they still remember it, some of them, the 14th and 15th century political strife when Florence conquered Siena. So yeah, that's a good question.
What's your tapestry?
Right. We still need to look up whose tapestry this is.
Or it's the seafaring dude.
Yeah. So this tapestry dates to the 1490s. And this belonged to an Englishman who was a member of the Order of the Garter, right? So that's why there's multiple garters here. Honi soit qui mal y pense. And so these are his arms. Those are his arms, and these are his sigils. He was apparently a seafarer of some sort. I think I don't remember if he was an admiral in the Navy or something like that.
I really should have.
They didn't really have a navy like we understand. England didn't have a navy like we understand it now, in terms of that kind of level of organization. But yeah, I don't remember who it was exactly, but all of these tapestries were private commissions, and they nearly always have the arms of the patron who commissioned them woven into them. This is a style that was very fashionable in the Burgundian court in the 15th century, and the English were nothing if not frequent copiers when it came to fashion and art in the 15th century. Especially their ties to Burgundy are very visible.
John Lord Dinham.
John Lord Dinham apparently was the man who had this commissioned. So
1488
yep.
to 1501. Yep. Originally woven by Flemish weavers.
Yeah, woven in Flanders always. Okay. Any other fashion questions? Otherwise, we should get to the cooking. Yes. Because this happens every time. We talk, and we never get to the cooking. But I have a hard end today because I have my afternoon traditional Korean painting class to attend. So we can't just keep going and going and going.
There are other fashion questions.
Yes. What are they?
How does Siena's fashion differ from Florentine?
Siena?
Sienese, yeah.
Oh, Sienese fashion. Yeah. Yeah, so you'd have to go and look at the portraits to do a comparison. Different silhouette, different lines, different colors. Siena was much less into modesty than Florence was. Florence prided itself on ostensibly being a republic and having ejected all of its aristocrats. And Siena is technically also a republic, but yeah, you'd have to actually look at pictures. But I will tell you that it's different enough that they recognize it. Now, random shop clerks in Siena recognize it on sight. Okay, let's get down to cooking, everyone. And I will be happy to hold forth about more fashion questions once we get doing some of the rote tasks of the medieval kitchen. Because remember, my whole ethos to medieval cookery is that I try to use as much medieval equipment and as many medieval techniques as I can, given the constraints of my current situation. I have in storage almost an entire replica medieval, almost an entire set of replica medieval cookware, but I'm not there. And so I have a combination here today of medieval equipment and modern equipment. But I do have the comically giant mortar. Oops, I do have the comically giant mortar. And so we will be grinding a lot today in this baby. And while I'm doing things like grinding spices, I can absolutely answer more questions. So let's get to the spice blending, and then I will field more questions about clothing or art or general non-culinary related history of culinary history related questions. Yes. Right. So we're going to be making first our fine spice blend. Fine spices for all foods. Take an ounce of pepper, 1 of cinnamon, 1 of ginger, half a quarter ounce of cloves, and a quarter of saffron. And this is from a 14th century Venetian cookbook. Right. So it doesn't really matter so much how much an ounce actually is. What matters, and what is so wonderful about this recipe, is that it has ratios, right? So based on this recipe, we know that the ratio of pepper to cinnamon to ginger is 1 to 1 to 1. So they should be taken in equal measure by weight, And then we know that cloves relative to the pepper, cinnamon, and ginger should be, this is an interesting bit of a turn of phrase, half a quarter ounce of cloves. So instead of saying 1/8 of an ounce, they say half of a quarter. And I have seen this style of measuring for fabric as well, where they actually say half a quarter or a quarter of velvet. So it seems almost like they hadn't gotten to the point where they knew to say 1/8 or a 16th, but they did know they made this compound phrase instead. So basically 1/8 of an ounce of cloves and a quarter of an ounce of saffron, right? So what that means is that pepper, cinnamon, and ginger are all in equal flavor proportions. Not surprisingly, cloves should be the least of them. And then cinnamon is somewhere between cloves and the 3 big spices in terms of its combination. Oh, did someone want to see the comically big?
I just want to show the comically.
Everyone, this is our comically large pestle, which we could actually use in here, but I'd have to put it on the ground, and then you couldn't see me.
And our downstairs neighbors.
Our downstairs, well, it's a work day, but actually also because we have to fill in this gap before we start using it, because I don't want to be pounding herbs into the end. This is an antique one. But yeah, think about if you use this as your pestle, you're really going to be able to put your full force of your body behind it. Spices will be pulverized in seconds.
Kill a man
with
this.
That's our hope anyway. Okay, so I have a scale. Now, this fine spice blend is something that you can make up, and then you can just have the spices, this blend waiting in your cabinet for those times when you need a fine spice blend. However, in the medieval kitchen, it is very likely they would have made this ad hoc as needed. They would not have made this up in advance and had those ground spices just sitting and losing their flavor. One, spices were insanely expensive in this era. You think they're expensive now? Oh, no, my friends. Way more expensive in that era. 2, spices, when they sit, they lose their flavor. They lose their pungency because the spices, the active ingredients, the essential oils basically oxidize. So they lose their potency. That's why if you have the luxury and the time of freshly grinding your spices every time you need them, do that. Don't buy ground spices. Buy whole spices, grind them as you need them. They'll last much, much longer. They'll be much stronger in flavor. They'll be much more impactful in your dishes. That being said, grinding is another question. A lot of you, maybe if you cook, you have those coffee grinders that you use for grinding your spices with the little metal blades and the little hopper at the top, and you press it down and it makes that terrible, terrible horror movie sound. That is actually not the best way to grind your spices. Those blades get really hot from the speed at which they're moving, and that actually impacts the flavors of the spices and causes the oils to actually go rancid. So it is actually best if you use a mortar and pestle or a mechanical grinder, one of those old-fashioned hand-cranked coffee grinders. That would be much better than the modern ones with those blades that spin really fast and get really hot. Yes.
Question. Well, it's not really a question.
Okay.
They said I tried that, but they grew moldy sooner than the ground spices. So how should you store your whole spices to prevent that?
You did have stuff that's lasted for years.
What grew moldy? What grew moldy? The whole spices grew moldy?
Yeah.
That's weird. I have whole spices that I've had for 20 years and they've never gone moldy. I don't know. I don't know what's happening with your spices. Do you live in a wet environment, a moist environment? In which case you might want to consider putting something in the jars that will keep them from getting moist. But wait, we talking about spices or herbs? Okay, so what's the difference between spices and herbs? Spices are the bark and the seeds. Herbs and the roots. Herbs are the leafy green parts. I could see maybe the herbs going moldy if they weren't dried properly, but spices are antimicrobial, extremely antimicrobial, like with prejudice antimicrobial, which is why they're so effective as medicinal teas, actually. So that really shocks me. So I might need more intelligence on the spices that specifically went moldy and the kinds of containers in which they were kept. Yeah, that's very unusual. I've never had spices go moldy. I have had herbs go moldy, and I actually have had dried mushrooms go moldy. 100%. That has happened to me.
Ursula said they keep theirs in their freezer.
Yeah. So freezer is actually, I mean, that is the best option. Honestly, putting your spices in your freezer is the best option because it basically puts them in cryostasis. Yeah, that is probably the best option. Because even spices in your cabinet, even whole, if your home gets really hot in the summer, those temperature fluctuations are deleterious to the spices. They are less deleterious if your spices are whole, but it still will have an impact of them over time. So yeah, putting them in your freezer, if you can have a spice freezer, in fact, that's the best. That would be the best option. Not the most environmentally friendly option, mind you, but the best option for your spices anyway. Gosh, went moldy. That's hard. That is hard indeed. Okay, so today so an ounce. If we consider the ratios, I'm not necessarily going to ultimately create what is a lot of spice actually, because 3 ounces, 3 3/4 or 3.5 ounces, not even 3 1/3 ounce, 3 1/3 ounce of ground spice is actually quite a lot, but I'm still going to stick to these ratios. So I have here a digital scale. They had scales in the Middle Ages. They were balance scales. They were really sophisticated balance scales with really finely graduated weights. And those weights were often inspected by authorities in various cities because they had to, because humans will human. And if humans can find a way to cheat or get something without working for it, they will. It's nothing new, not a new concept. It's not like this is a new issue in civilization. We have records. We have clay discs from ancient Sumeria that talk about scams and fraud by a variety of merchants and artisans. So nothing new. So these weights, basically it's a balance scale, right? You have two trays. On the one tray, you put your regulated weights and you put the right combination of these graduated weights until you balance out with the other side. And that will tell you how much your items weigh. I'm really looking to buy a replica 15th century balance scale. So if you know of a source for one, let me know. In the meanwhile, digital kitchen scale for the win. Okay. So put my little bowl there. And yes, I sadly do not have a replica, any of my replica bowls, mixing bowls. They're all in storage. So we're just going to use a metal one. And I think I'm going to go with maybe 5 grams each. Okay, so let's talk about our spices. So we have cinnamon, right? Cinnamon comes in 2 types. This is cinnamomum verum. This is true cinnamon. Cassia, what's called Chinese cinnamon or Saigon cinnamon, that is not true cinnamon. That's a different tree altogether. And in the medieval sources, if they want cassia, they call for cassia.
Oh, reptiles.
If they want cinnamon, this is what they mean. So you can tell the difference because you'll notice it's not a single scroll of tree bark. it's thin layers of the bark of the cinnamon tree layered into each other, and then that's cut into these smaller sticks. So if you can see the millefeuille layering effect, then you know that you have true cinnamon. If there's just one single thick scroll, that's cassia. This is the cinnamon that has all those health benefits. Cassia does not. So calls for cinnamon, not cassia, so we're using that. Let me see how much one of these sticks weighs. I did one of these little 7 grams. Okay, we're just gonna go with that. We're gonna go with 7 grams each. We're gonna go with 7 grams each. Okay, so 7 grams of our cassia. These are cloves. No, even ones first. Peppercorns. Peppercorns are berries. Actually, so are coffee beans. They're berries. They're not beans at all. They're berries, right? And peppercorns are also berries. And they actually get this way by being sunburnt. You put the berries in the sun, the UV has this effect on them. I feel like maybe this should be a lesson for what happens to human skin if you spend too much time in the UV light. Huh? Anyway, off of that little mini soapbox. So peppercorns were so expensive that I have a record from early 14th century Germany in which an artisan is paid, or a worker, a laborer, sorry, and I don't remember what his job was exactly. This laborer was paid for an entire year's wages with 7 peppercorns. So take that for what you will. 7 peppercorns for the whole year, for a whole year's worth of work. So that should tell you something about the value of peppercorn. And just like with all the other spices, it's always better for you to grind it yourself. Honestly, I think so many people don't actually know what black pepper actually tastes like because they only get the cheap stuff that's been pre-ground and that has almost no flavor left. But oh, it just smells so delicious. Okay, so let's go ahead and put 7 grams of peppercorns in here. Also, please let us know if you're enjoying the music, the background music, or if it's irritating somehow. Beloved, I need 2 more grams of peppercorns.
2 more grams of
I
peppercorns?
do.
I did not give you enough pepper.
You did not give me enough peppercorns. We need more peppercorns.
This is like another year's wages.
This is another year's wages. We've got out 2 years' wages of peppercorns in this spice blend. Okay. And when you're using one of these scales and you're working in these really fine numbers, like grams at a time, this is not exactly necessarily, this isn't a scientific scale. It's not designed to go into nanograms, right? So you might have to actually tap the bowl just to force the scale to acknowledge that you've done something to it. There we go. Okay, we're at 7. Brilliant. Okay, I think our beans are done. We'll do a test on them. So this is a replica medieval eating kit by Todd Cutler. The thing that is a bit fanciful about it is the spot for the spoon. We actually I've never seen evidence of one of these sheath sets that has a slot for the spoon. So that's maybe a reenactorism, but there it is. Anyway, here is a replica 15th century spoon. Pretty nice, huh? Just gonna go ahead, give our beans a stir and see how they're doing. So this is half of a fava bean.
Did they just give the guy the peppercorns up front or spread it out over the year?
Oh, so that's another interesting thing. Wages are usually paid once a year. Once a year, which is why, if any of you read Jane Eyre, right? When she goes to visit her family, she talks about, needing money because he hasn't paid her anything yet. Because it's not time to get paid yet, once a year. Can you imagine? People clearly manage their money differently in those days.
Somebody says, oh, awesome, medieval culinary.
Yep. Yeah, so for those just joining, welcome to my medieval cooking party. Today we're going to be making a 15th century Italian broad bean fava bean fritter from Naples specifically. We are in the process of measuring out the ingredients for our fine spice blend, and we're about to grind it using a real medieval style mortar and pestle. Yes, that's granite.
Say hi to reptiles.
Reptiles, thank you for joining us today. Welcome. Okay, so this is technically ground galangal. I actually don't have any ground ginger, but I have ground galangal, but it looks like ground ginger and it's a more nuanced version of ginger. Ginger, however, ginger and black pepper are two of the most common spices in the medieval culinary world at the upper end, at the upper echelons. Very clearly, your average farmhand or gong farmer, it's all coming back to farming, or laundress, what are called lavanders in 15th century English, are not going to be able to afford these kinds of spices on a daily basis. However, by the 15th century, it seems they could, even people like that, could afford them as a group on special holy days like Christmas. So for the really special feasts, they would actually pull their money, splurge, and purchase these spices for their food. But no, would they eat this way every day? No, this is very clearly anything that involves fine spices is aimed at the upper echelons of society in terms of earnings and income and disposable income specifically, right? So we're going to go ahead and use galangal because I don't have ginger, but ginger was very common, and in Italy, in the Italies, because there wasn't just one Italy at this era, ginger was available dried and fresh. So, some people say, oh, that's impossible. It was coming from South Asia. There's no way they could have made it. Ginger root and galangal, actually, both were available fresh. Ginger and galangal they're rhizomes, they're swamp plants, basically, and they are very hardy. I know that if you just keep them layered between two wet towels, for instance, they'll never go bad. I've got fresh galangal root in a bowl of water in my fridge that I've had for 6 months at this point, and it's still fine. So if you were to ship these roots in, say, barrels of water, they would get to Italy just fine. Probably even maybe if you layered them between wet straw also, but I think the barrels of water might be the winning method. But we know that they had fresh ginger in Italy because we have recipes. For example, there's one in the Neapolitan collection that calls for the ginger to be peeled. And the amount of ginger that it calls for one recipe, for one batch of the recipe is immense if it were dry ginger, right? It actually calls for an ounce of ginger peeled. If an ounce of of ground ginger, dried and ground ginger, that's a lot of ginger. It would be almost inedible, right? But peeling ginger kind of automatically means it's not dry ginger. But dry ginger was definitely something they had. And when you're talking about a spice blend like this, no doubt they're talking about dry ginger, not fresh ginger. So that makes sense. Galangal I actually consider galangal to be the much more nuanced version of ginger. It's much more complex. It has gingery notes, but it also has like mustardy notes. It's a much rounder flavor. So I don't have any ground ginger. I'm going to do what a medieval person would have done. I'm going to find a good substitute from the kitchen that I already have, and here we go. But, it looks like ground ginger for the purposes of you watching. It looks very, 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 very much the same. Just has a slightly different taste. I call galangal ginger for grown-ups. Okay, let's see.
Hello to Sophia, JD, Josh, and Kim.
Sophia, JD, and Josh, and Kim, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to my medieval cooking party. Today, 15th century Italian cuisine.
And Nam, you have an opportunity to address a medieval myth here.
Oh, good.
Spice is extremely rare in that time, and only noblemen have them.
Which is funny. I just finished saying, Nam, maybe you weren't listening, or maybe it hadn't gotten there yet. I just finished saying that spices are definitely the purview of the wealthy, but not only noblemen had them. Absolutely not. Wealthy merchants had access to them. And at special seasons, special times of the year, we know that peasants would often splurge and purchase spices for special dishes at feasts like Christmas feast. So no, it was not only the aristocrats who ever tasted spices. It was just a question of how often they might actually get to use those spices. Yes, absolutely. People on the lower echelons of society are not eating with spices every day. But as I said, this is a cookbook from the court of Naples. So this is aimed at an upper class society. But what's interesting is that with the exception of these spices, almost everything else in this recipe would pin it as something that could have been eaten by lower income households, for instance. Okay, so we have now our ginger, our, aim this down a little bit better. Yeah, we have now our ginger, we have our peppercorns, we have our true cinnamon, and now let us move on to our cloves. So cloves should be an eighth of this, basically. So we're going to go for about a gram of cloves. That's going to be exciting to try to get it to acknowledge a gram of cloves. These are cloves. Cloves come from Indonesia. And actually, for a long time, Europeans didn't know where they came from. It was a mystery. It isn't until I think the 17th century that Europeans figure out where cloves come from. So they are actually flowers. They are flower blossoms. And just like the peppercorns, they're put in the sun to let the UV transform them, right? Cloves are very pungent, and that's why there isn't much used in this, relatively speaking. Cloves have some very powerful medicinal properties. Lots of powerful active ingredients are contained in cloves. And one of the things you may or may not have noticed about cloves is that if you chew on one, it will have an analgesic effect on your mouth. It is a natural numbing agent. And they acknowledged this in the Middle Ages. They acknowledged this numbing property. Okay. They acknowledged this numbing property. And actually, ground cloves, it's actually recommended that if your teeth hurt, you should chew on a clove and it will reduce your pain. Or if you have a painful abscess in your mouth. I think it might be the Trotula, but it might be a different health manual that talks about chewing on cloves to relieve the pain of abscesses, of gum disease, and of tooth pain. So they acknowledge that. And they also had clove oil that they could put on your skin topically for procedures. For example, wart removal, which was done in the Middle Ages. There was actually a lot more surgery happening in the Middle Ages than people would like to believe. Okay, so our final spice is saffron. Saffron is the stamen of the saffron crocus. I know some of you heard this before. I just have to hear it again for those who are just joining my medieval cooking party. This crocus saffron is a specific cultivar of crocus. You can't just get this from any crocus popping up through your yard in the springtime. To this day, saffron is one of the most, if not the most, expensive spices in the world by weight because it is still a product of manual labor. It can't be done, you can't be harvested by machine, it can't be processed by machine. It takes human hands to both pick the stema to pick the crocus and then to pick the stema out of the crocus. So it is very expensive. It has sometimes been called red gold. And at times throughout history, various times, not just one, but various times throughout history, it has also been as expensive by weight as gold, shockingly. So saffron is very expensive. The best saffron in the world currently comes from Spain. They've just got the best growing conditions for it. And it is very easy to get scammed when it comes to saffron. So if you go to a spice bazaar in many parts of the world, equatorial parts of the world, places that are close to the equator, right? Very often I've been to bazaars in Turkey, in Istanbul, where they were selling not real saffron at what seems like a great price until you realize you're buying marigold leaves or marigold petals, right? So you have to be careful about getting scammed with saffron if you go to spice bazaars. That's why I don't really buy it from spice bazaars anymore. I mean, also, I now know what saffron looks like. It's got a very distinct, thin, spindly look, and it's a delicious shade of red, right? Which I know that confuses some people because it makes a yellow dye stuff, but that's how dye stuffs generally work, in fact. Okay, so the recipe called for 1/4 ounce of saffron, and so we have 7 grams here, so we're gonna go for, considering the limitations of this scale, we'll go with 2 grams of saffron, which I think might actually be more than this. So this would have been a very expensive spice blend. I need to get more saffron. Thankfully, I have lots of saffron. This would have been a very expensive spice blend. It would have been, it's very clear that fine spices, the word fine seems to refer to cost. Now, granted, as was said earlier, all spices were expensive. They just were, because almost in the Middle Ages, saffron cultivation didn't start until the later Middle Ages in Europe, and with the exception of Spain, right? It was mostly cultivated in Spain, but almost all other spices were not cultivated anywhere near Europe. They had to be imported from South Asia, Southeast Asia, or the islands off of Southeast Asia. Come on, little guy.
Should I mock somebody?
Should you mock someone?
Gentle mocking.
Gentle mocking? Why are we mocking?
They said this channel is bizarre. B-C-A-A-R.
Oh.
We do have a lot of items tagged in the shop.
Yeah. This channel is bizarre. This is a living history channel. So if you're not into history, then this is not the channel for you. But we're actually doing a cooking show today. Okay, how much? 5 grams. Oh, yeah. Okay, that is a lot of saffron. Wow.
They spelled it B-A-Z-A.
Right. Yeah. We do actually have some items tagged in the shop. So if you're interested in buying some replica medieval living history items, then feel free to check out the little shopping cart, the shopping bag that's on the screen. And I actually do get a commission for anything you buy there. Full disclosure. Full disclosure. Okay, so actually, yeah, this is a lot of saffron, interestingly. So that is about 2 grams of saffron. That's pretty intense. Okay. Oh wait, no, that was only 1 gram of saffron. Okay, I need to add some more. So yeah, this spice blend will be quite pungent, but I think it will be very nice indeed. Okay, so now we get to grind our spices. This is where we break out the mortar and pestle that you all love watching me use. When you're using a mortar and pestle, put padding under it. Just one, it's going to prevent the surface on which you're working from possibly being damaged by the effort. Also, if you have neighbors, it will make them happy. And I live in an apartment, so yeah, this will definitely make them much happier. Okay, do I want to use the comically large mortar and pestle, or do I want to use the spice mortar and pestle? It'll go faster in the comically large mortar and pestle. It will just be a pain in the butt to get it all out, but here we go. Do we have a, yes, we do. Oh, it's still wet. Nope, that won't do. Okay, well, we'll just have to do without some of the, normally I would use my pastry brush to get the rest of the galangal powder out of here, but the brush is wet because we just washed it. Okay, here we go. Let me see. Handsome, can they see into the mortar or a little bit?
I won't know for a couple of moments.
Oh, okay. Oh, and when you're using a mortar and pestle, break things up as much as possible or chop things up as much as possible before you start the process. It will make it go faster. The only thing I can really chop up here in advance is the cinnamon stick because everything else is way too small for that.
I think the taste of the saffron would be lost in the cloves and other spices.
Do I think the taste will be lost?
You know they can't see inside the...
Right, I don't. Let me see. Let me see if I can adjust the camera so maybe you can see a little bit better. What did that do?
Somebody, Kelly, said hi to Kelly.
Hello, Kelly. Thank you for joining us today.
And Kelly says there must have been a very good economy of Naples in this time period. That spice blend is pricey.
Yeah. So this is, Naples was a super wealthy kingdom in this era. Naples in the 15th century is nothing like Naples now, right? You think of Naples now, you think of mafia corruption, you think about violence, you think about neighborhoods that are very colorful. I've been to Naples quite frequently over the last 20 years, so this is not me judging from a distance. I've been to Naples when there was a trash strike on. I've been, that was in the middle of the summer. Not good. Anyway, so yeah, Naples in the Middle Ages was a very wealthy kingdom. Ferrante, the son of Alfonso, the Aragonese conqueror of Naples, who kicked the Angevin out of Naples, he set up this amazing court that was diverse, multicultural. He supported the arts. He supported literature. He supported, his court was a shining light in the 15th century. And in fact, when 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 men would get exiled from Florence for political reasons, nearly always, many of them went to Naples to make their fortune because it was known that that was where you wanted to be. It was a great place to be. So yeah, Naples was definitely on the higher end of standard of living in the 15th century. But again, remember that almost all of the recipe collections that have been handed down to us are the cuisine of the upper crust, right? These are not the recipes enjoyed by the average person because the average people couldn't afford parchment. They couldn't afford things like books. Books were extremely expensive in this era. And so, yeah, these recipe collections are certainly generally do not reflect commoner food, except for the Lenten recipes. The Lenten recipes are nearly always much, much simpler and consist of just pulses and vegetables and bread. And so those might actually offer us a window into the way that the average person, the recipes of the common person. But yeah, this fine spice blend would absolutely be, and that's why it's called fine. Fine, I think, might be a reflection of expensive. It's like fine is a refined way of saying expensive. It's a tasteful way of saying expensive, right? The fine spices. And would the saffron be lost against the other spices? Not really, because 2 grams of saffron is a lot of saffron. I think saffron has a lot of umami in it, and that's one of the primary functions of saffron, is that it's a flavor booster. You don't necessarily taste the saffron, but it boosts other flavors. Another thing about saffron is that it will color your food a really pretty color. Right, so it will, if you mix it in, it will make it a nice yellow or gold color. This mortar is granite. Another common material out of which mortars in the Middle Ages were made. They were often they were cast out of bronze, or they were made out of wood also. And if I could get a bronze or a wood mortar, I would probably prefer that because they're lighter. This thing is heavy, 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 heavy. I'm sorry, what?
It weighs about 32 pounds.
Yeah, it weighs about 32 pounds. Is my arm tired? No, I do this too much for my arm to get tired. Okay, I've got to put a mask on. I didn't want to have to do this, but I don't want to develop fibrosis or lung cancer. So yeah, you should know that when you're grinding spices, you will get fine dust and you don't want to inhale it like I just did. Ugh. Yeah, so I'm not wearing this mask out of fear of infection. I just don't want fibrosis. Which also should give you a moment to think about the poor scullion in the kitchen whose job it was to just grind spices. Kitchens where these kinds of recipes were made were generally pretty well-oiled machines with lots of people working in them, and everyone had a specialty. Right? You had one person whose job was to make the pastries, and by which I mean the pastry dough, and which was also the same person who made the pasta dough. They were the same thing. They were indistinguishable in many of these recipes, actually. There was one person whose job it was to control and fuel the fire. There was one person whose job it was to manage the spicery, and probably under them would be the person who would actually grind the spices on demand. It's amazing how quickly this goes in this big one. Wow. I really enjoy grinding anything in this mortar. It's very relaxing. It's a very transcendental experience almost. Whew, okay. Take a look at that. Yeah. Just gonna give it one more grinding. Just want it to be really fine.
Why don't you use a coffee grinder?
Why don't I use a coffee grinder? One, this is a medieval cooking show, and I am using wherever possible medieval techniques and medieval methods. And the mortar and pestle is one of the, this is the food processor of the Middle Ages. This and a knife and a cutting board together are the food processors of the Middle Ages. Everything that needs to be mashed or ground, pounded, made rendered into something fine, it goes in the mortar, right? Two, coffee grinders. Yeah, you don't want to, if you don't have to, I don't recommend a coffee grinder for your spices because those blades get really hot and that impacts the flavors of your spices to the point where it might make the oils inside of your spices rancid and inflammatory. Okay, good enough. Here's our spice blend. I can tell you from what I inhaled, it smells really pretty. Okay, so I'm going to endeavor to decant this into.
Yeah, if you pinch the nose a little bit more, it'll keep it from coming in.
There is no pinch.
Oh, there's no pinch on that one?
Nope. This is just cloth. Yeah, no, I agree. If it had a wire in it, that would work. I don't. It does not.
Like I said, I never thought about the blades making spices hot. Did medieval people ever build a version of a Rube Goldberg machine for things like spice grinding?
A what?
Rube Goldberg?
I don't know what that is.
Rube Goldberg made incredibly complex devices to do really simple tasks.
Oh.
Usually, like, absurd.
Oh.
They're hilarious. I love Rube Goldberg machines.
No, as far as I know, no, I don't. I haven't heard of any such inventions. But to be frank, there are actually throughout the Middle Ages some weird inventions that crop up here and there that most people don't know about because, you know, we're still discovering a lot of texts from the Middle Ages about the Middle Ages. So occasionally we come across interesting tidbits such as that. But no, I'm not aware of any. In fact, meat grinders didn't exist in the Middle Ages. Do you all know why minced meat is called minced meat and not ground meat in British English? Because in the Middle Ages, until the meat grinders were invented in, I don't know, the 18th century, you minced with knives. You would mince meat to make it fine like ground meat. And that's the way they still do it. In Asia, places where they don't have meat grinders, they still mince it with two cleavers. We witnessed it firsthand in Thailand in February. So yeah. Good enough. Okay. There is our little spice blend. Put to the side.
I don't know what you mean by 3/3, please, Eric. Wire was invented in 1452. I mean, they had wire.
What do you mean by wire? Wire has existed for literally thousands of years.
People mean like drawn wire.
Drawn wire has existed for thousands of years. We have drawn wire from ancient Egyptian tombs.
Yeah, for the fast drawn wire.
Yeah, we have drawn wire for thousands of years. So I'm not certain what you mean by wire was invented when?
1452.
Yeah, what do you mean by wire was invented in 1452? Do you mean like electrical wire? Like wires that transmit electricity? But no, drawn wire has existed for thousands of years. Okay.
It would have been the equivalent to an air fryer.
A deep fryer. It would have been deep frying. That's the closest you have to an air fryer. It would have been deep frying. It would have been the OG fryer, the deep frying, basically oil in a pot, which is kind of what we're going to be doing today. Right. Okay. So we have our fine spice made. Next, we're going to move on to the Neapolitan recipe collection. This is an edition you can buy. Terrence Scully. Did we tag this? Did you tag the Neapolitan recipe collection?
I did.
Yes. So if you click on the shopping bag for this live stream and you want to buy your own copy, if you buy the one that's tagged here through that link, I do get a kickback from it.
Remember,
No?
I couldn't find that one.
Oh.
We've got the Form of Curry in there and the
Oh.
Good Man of Paris.
Okay. Well, we've got the Form of Curry and the Good Men of Paris under our shopping bags, two very excellent sources for medieval cooking. Anyway, today we're working from the Neapolitan recipe collection. This is edited by Terence Scully. It's called Cuoco Napoletano because that is the entry in the, I think it's the 18th century table of contents that was added to this collection calls it that.
I only had it from Walmart.
Right,
That's
yeah.
why.
No, we're not going to screw Walmart. I will not send business to Walmart no matter what. Okay, so let's look at the original dish. So there's actually, this is part of a series of Lenten dishes, in fact. Lenten dishes are dishes that you eat on fasting days. And as I said earlier, there are 130 plus, give or take, days of the year.
They want you to spin too.
Okay, there are 100. Could you wait until I finish a sentence before telling me things like that?
Yeah.
Thank you. Jesus Christ. There are 130 days of the year where, during which medieval people would fast, right? So they would actually not eat meat, not eat dairy, not eat, hypothetically, not even eggs were supposed to be eaten on those days. So there were basically pescatarian vegan days because they did eat fish. Fish does not count as meat because apparently they thought fish did not reproduce via sexual reproduction. And that is apparently the definition of meat in the official ethos of the medieval mindset. They didn't understand. Obviously, they didn't understand how fish reproduced. Anyway, here's a spin. Here's the whole outfit. Actually, I just realized I'm probably not on the camera anymore. Okay, try that again. Here's the full spin. I have several getting dressed videos on this channel showing getting dressed from the undergarments out, from the skin out, with historical details in them. So after this live stream, if you go look up getting dressed on my channel under videos, not live streams, you will see multiple videos of this getting dressed in this style of clothing, including the top layers that I'm not wearing right now.
Oh, hi, Red Australia.
Red Australia, thank you for coming back. Welcome back, my friend. Okay, so this is part of a series of recipes that are intended for these fasting days. And there's a recipe right before it that I want to include as well because it provides a very interesting detail. Both of them are fava bean, broad bean recipes. So, broad beans. Get or purchase broad bean paste and put it in a pot with good oil. Fry an onion and put it in the pot with an ounce of raisins. Dish it up, garnished with spices and sugar. Now, the thing that's interesting about that is that it says get or purchase broad bean paste. So this is actually a window into Neapolitan society and Neapolitan groceries. Availability of broad bean paste as a finished product that you could buy. So it seems that kitchens were not necessarily expected to produce their own broad bean paste. They could actually just buy it wholesale, already ready to go, which also gives us a hint as to how common these kinds of dishes were, how common dishes made out of broad bean paste must have been. If it's something that is suggested that you can just go purchase it, you don't even have to make it yourself. That is very rare in a medieval recipe. Most medieval recipes assume you have to do everything yourself. So it actually references what is a documentable convenience food product, food ingredient here in the 15th century. So that means there must have been broad bean paste preparers and sellers. Maybe they specialized in just that. Maybe they sold other items as well, maybe in addition to spices or in addition to fresh produce. I don't know. But that's a tantalizing little tidbit right there. Okay, so our recipe, however, is this one.
Oh, greetings from Ireland.
Broad beans in a pan.
Wait, Alfonso said you're from Sicily earlier.
No, he's from Naples. Alfonso's from Naples. Definitely from Naples, not Sicily. If I said Sicily, that was a mistake. He's from Naples. Oh, wait, what did you say?
This person on here said hello from Ireland.
Oh.
And a little while ago, they said hello from Sicily.
Oh, okay. Sorry,
I remember you.
I thought you were talking about the king who conquered Naples from the Angevin princes. Okay. Anyway, broad beans in a pan. Get enough broad bean paste, which we just mentioned, for the size of a fritter you want to make, and get chervil, a little sage, chopped figs, apples, mint, and parsley. Mix everything together and fry it in good oil. Remove it onto a round platter with put it onto a round platter and garnish with fine spices. There's our fine spices. All right, so at the outset, this seems like a pretty simple recipe, and it generally is, but let's talk about a couple of things here. So first we need to make our broad bean paste. We have our cooked broad beans and they've semi-pasted themselves, but I'm gonna put them in the mortar to finish the pasting process. And then we will be adding to it some green herbs. Now, chervil, I was absolutely unable to procure chervil. I am currently in South Korea, in Daegu, South Korea, and we were not able to find chervil. So I'm going to use some of the other green herbs that I do actually already have, fresh green herbs that I already have in my fridge. So the herbs that we're going to be using today, and I wasn't able to get fresh sage either. I do have some dried sage, and I might end up using some of that dried and powdered sage. But I do have mint and I do have parsley. In lieu of the chervil, I'm going to actually add some thyme and some dill, all of which are also found in other recipes in this collection. And I think that would be probably an authentic approach to making these, is that if you don't happen to have those fresh herbs, but you have these other fresh herbs and their flavors are good, then you use them. Right? I don't have chervil though. But what's interesting is the addition of these sweet items, figs and apples. Now the figs are most likely dried. The apples are probably fresh. So we're going to be working with fresh apple and we're going to be working with dried figs, right? So this is a very interesting combination of sweet and savory. And then that's all going to be mixed together and it's going to be fried in oil. And then the fine spices go on top. So what you may or may not have noticed is that there's no mention of salt. Now, this is where we as the cook, as the redactor, have to decide. Are we going to add salt in any way? Because there's two schools of thought on the use of salt in medieval cuisine and medieval cooking specifically. Salt was absolutely served at the table because salt was also fine salt anyway. The kind of salt you would use for eating was very, very expensive, right? And especially depending on where you were and how easy it was for salt to be produced. This is a replica salt cellar, a dish for salt in which you would serve salt and put it at the table, right? Very elegant little accessory, is it not? So one of the theories about cooking of salt in medieval cuisine is that it was only added at the table because it appears in very, very, very few recipes. Or one of the other theories is that it was so common that they didn't, to add salt to taste while cooking was so common that you wouldn't need to specify that you should add salt to these dishes. So those seem to be the two main schools of thought. I tend to add a little bit of salt during the cooking process so that there is some flavor enhancement actually built into it so that it's not just all surface level, but I don't oversalt it. I don't even salt it necessarily to the level that I would want it myself. This also allows your guests to adjust the salt to their own taste, of course. But you get to decide. I mean, which would you do? Would you add the salt if you're trying to do this as an authentic 15th century dish? Would you add the salt, some salt during cooking, or would you just save it entirely for service at the table? Yeah, let me know. I'm interested to hear where you all fall in the great salt debate. Yes.
Say thank you, Stars Glowing.
Oh, thank you.
Jewels.
Thank you, Stars Glowing. Appreciate those jewels. Thank you so much.
JD, did not realize you were in South Korea. There is a good question about the fava bean paste.
Yes.
That I almost missed.
Yes.
How long would that paste keep, do you think?
Oh, that is a good question. So, if it were salted, I think this bean paste would actually last for a pretty long time. I might not have to put this in the mortar. I might be able to just mash it right in this pot.
Direct mashing.
Yeah, direct mashing. How long would this paste keep? It will ferment. Like this, seriously, it will not keep for very long. It will ferment pretty quickly. Beans are very natural at fermenting anyway, so it will not. The paste itself, just by itself, without salt added to it, will not keep for very long. However, once you add these spices in, its shelf life would definitely increase because the spices are very antimicrobial. However, The figs and the apples are not antimicrobial. They're the opposite of antimicrobial, especially with the apple. The fig is dry, so it's actually okay, more or less. The apple, though, is not dry. It's wet, so it's probably going to encourage microbial growth. So this is something you should probably, the bean paste itself, you know, I don't think it would have a terribly long shelf life. I think it's something that was probably made fresh on a daily basis because that's how common it was. And you would just send someone to the market to buy it when you needed it.
Medieval tradwife content.
Medieval tradwife content. Oh no. Abso-fucking-lutely not. Not even the slightest. No tradwife here, my friends.
Stars Go In says, if it was limited in availability, I'd probably just add it at the table to taste. But I do add when cooking, but honestly not a ton because I don't like it that bad. Ursel Bear thinks with salt. Ren Gator says, I kid about the medieval trad life.
Oh, okay, that's cool. That's cool. No, I'm cool if it's joking. See, the problem is I get a lot of people who say that and they're not kidding. Yeah, no, it's fine. I can totally take a joke. That is cool.
How do you call a person who cooks from scratch, barefoot in the kitchen, but they're single and no children? I'm going to learn how to can soon, so I'm excited. And Travis Pickles says they're in the process of making fermented pickles, which they've never done before. So hopefully it comes out okay.
Oh, are you making lacto fermentation, which is really cool? Yeah, fermented for the win. You know, living in or spending as much time as we do in Korea, of course, there's fermented everything everywhere on the table. Fermented baby shrimp for flavoring your food. All kinds of fermented vegetables. Cabbage is not the only thing they ferment here as kimchi. So yeah, I love fermented. Fermentation is proof that God loves us. I love fermented things. I mean, you know, of course, fermented soybean paste, fermented red pepper paste. Koreans are really big on fermentation. And it shows in how healthy their diets are. Okay, let's see. This is pasted enough. I might actually have to add a little bit of water into this because it's dry here now. So.
Drying for the fermented pickles. The random F-bomb was not something I was expecting. It really spiced this up along with the ginger. Love the spiciness. Now it's starting to like.
Yeah, I don't often drop certain bombs and sprinkle them into my vocabulary. So when they come out, you know it's genuine. I prefer to use other words to express emotions like that. But sometimes.
I wonder if the readily available bean paste was used as a fast food in the marketplace.
Yeah, I mean, so there is a question about marketplace fast food in medieval Europe in general, right? The Romans had it. They had the what is the word, the Latin word for the hot plate bars, the hot food bars where you could just go and get the amount of the vats that were in the hot tables, basically, the chafing tables. Thermopylae is not what they're called. Damn it.
Yeah, no, I think that's right.
No, Thermopylae is a place in Greece.
It's a place in Greece, but that sounds very close.
Anyway, ancient Rome had it. What we do know is that there were portable ovens where they would actually go around and sell, depicted actually, where people could have their own pies and bread baked. But it also seems like they might have been selling hand pies from them as well. Thermopolia, right, yeah. Thermopolia, right, are the ancient Roman hot counters, basically. They're counters where you would put hot pots of food in them, and then you could just have, you know, fast food straight from these hot counters, like the first food trucks, but without the truck part, in essence. Now that seems to have gone away in most places in medieval Europe, as far as I can tell. Not that I've done a thorough study of fast food everywhere in medieval Europe, but let's talk about Italy specifically. I haven't seen evidence of fast food vendors in Italy, like street food vendors so much. But they had taverns, and they had ale houses, and all of those places tended to serve food in addition to the beverages that they were advertising. Okay, so this looks pretty mashy to me. Yeah, this looks pretty good. Okay, so I added a little water back in because it was getting really dry, and I might have to add a little more water. And that's because it's very dry here. It's very dry. So dry we get dry air warnings. Now you might not have to do that based on your own climatic conditions, right? Your barometric pressure and relative humidity might be different. So I would say though that you definitely want it to be not soaking wet, but wet enough that it's a nice moist mash, because if it gets too dry, it's going to crumble, right? That's the trick of beans. If it gets too dry, then it will just crumble, and then you're going to end up with lots of bean pieces in your oil. You're not going to end up with an actual fritter, right? Okay, so you want to have that water.
Would you need to bring your own hot pot to get that
food? In ancient Rome we're talking about?
Yeah, I guess.
That is a good question. I actually don't, that's those details that I do love to learn about, and no one has ever talked about that. I've been to Pompeii and Herculaneum so many times. I've taken official tours with official guides, and they always talk about the hot food counters, but they never bother to talk about details like that. They never bother to say, well, how is it that people got food from them? I actually don't know how food was served. I know that in places in South Asia now, for instance, if you go to a more traditional place or a place that's actually trying to save money, they'll serve food like street food on banana leaves, for instance. And in fact, in Thailand, they just recently passed a law that's forbidding the use of single-use plastic items for packaging. Say plastic packaging, right, in the stores. Handsome, what was that thing about the Thailand, the packaging in the stores? They're going back to banana leaves, right? Because that's what they used for literally thousands of years. And then they modernized to be more like the West, to go to plastic packaging, and everyone realized that's not a good plan. So they're going back to banana leaves. So, I'm trying to think of what would have been available in, say, Italy in the Roman Empire that you could just serve food on like a banana leaf. I can't think of anything offhand. Maybe a fig leaf. I don't know. Actually, I do not have an answer to that. If you would bring your own container, your own pot to get it, that would make sense. Because you were probably getting the food to bring it back to your home to eat. Because in ancient Rome, especially in Rome itself, there were these apartment buildings, basically, multi-story apartment buildings, and people didn't have kitchens at all. They didn't have a way to heat up food in any way, shape, or form, or cook at all. So they would go to those places and buy food, and presumably they would bring it back home so they could eat it at home with their families.
Yeah, China still does have the problem of so much plastic with their street food.
Yeah. Thailand, when we were last in Thailand, it was terrible. I want the mango, this beautiful green mango that has been prepared, it's been peeled, it's been removed from the horrible seed that's inside. Lovely spears ready to go. It's in a plastic baggie, and then they take the plastic baggie. It's already in a plastic baggie. They put that in another bag. No, I don't need a bag in a bag. Just really, I don't.
Yeah,
So
they literally put soup in plastic bags.
Yep. Yeah, they do in Thailand as well. Many street food places. They put curries and noodles and whatnot. If you get it to go, it goes in a plastic bag. It's like, so bad. Okay, here's our bean paste. I'm going to set this to the side while we prepare some of our other ingredients. And we'll have to wash this. So we're going to actually be using this for the frying. I'm going to have to give this a quick rinse at the very least, because if I put the oil in here, it's going to do unpleasant things probably with the starch that's left. Let me just give this a quick rinse. I'm sorry, what, Handsome? We don't eat green ones every day? I don't know. I love green mango. I can eat green mango every single day.
Yeah, we've been to Thailand many times.
Yep, we've been to Thailand a lot, and we're going back to Thailand on Friday. In fact, we have lots of friends in Thailand. We were just there in February, so we're going back on Friday, and we will be taking the night train up to Chiang Mai from Bangkok. I'm excited to finally get to try the night train, and we're going to be, where's my knife? And we're going to be staying at a lovely old school style hotel right on the Ping River. I'm very excited because it's this gorgeous, like 100-year-old building. So it's got this beautiful architecture. We're really looking forward to enjoying the beauty and history of Chiang Mai. Okay, so just so you know, I am actually using a replica 15th century knife by Todd Cutler. So you're getting is a pretty authentic feel here. Now, would they have used these for peeling? Probably. I have never seen in a 15th century kitchen depicted, or in the archaeology from the 15th century in Europe, any kind of implement that was specifically a vegetable peeler. If you have seen a 15th century, not 16th century, depiction or reference to a specialized tool like a peeler, let me know. Now, some of you might be saying, well, the recipe doesn't call for peeled apples. It doesn't. But I'm going to assume they're peeled apples for a couple of reasons. A lot of medieval recipes that do talk about vegetables, they nearly always talk about peeling them, scrubbing them, boiling them. Also, I think the peels would be kind of unpleasant inside of a fritter like this. I think it would be not texturally the best thing. But this is the kind of assumption that we have to make when we're redacting these recipes. Not all of the information is given to us, ever in a medieval recipe. And if you really think about it, there's a lot of modern recipes from across the world in multiple languages that also assume a certain level of prior knowledge, a certain familiarity with the dishes. You know, not all recipes, even these days, are super detailed. I mean, I have a cookbook that was published by 12 master chefs from India on Indian cuisine. And I will tell you that these are not well-written recipes. If I didn't have an intense familiarity with Indian cuisine already, I would not be able to successfully use this cookbook, right? So, you know, a lot of medieval recipes are the same way. They assume that you kind of already know what you're doing. So they don't need to spell every step out for you. Why would they waste expensive parchment, vellum, and scribe time on that? Okay, so the other thing that this recipe doesn't tell us, it doesn't say whether we should chop the apples. It doesn't tell us if they're chopped, what size they should be. I think we can all assume that you're definitely not putting a whole apple into the fritter. At least I don't think we are. And I think that we're just going to make the call to go with chopped up pieces. And we're going to do the same to our figs, right? Doesn't say chopped anyway, right? Okay, wait. Okay, but it does say chopped figs, and that chopped might also refer to the apples. So we're just going to assume that that's true. And in fact, that applies to everything else in that list. Chopped figs, apples, mint, and parsley. So I'm just going to assume that the chopped applies to everything, but I can look back at the original Italian, actually, and find out. Let me see. I'll look at the original Italian, 166. Beans in a pan. Do mashed beans. Piezzole. E pomme. It's kind of questionable. It literally says take figs cut into pieces, and apples and mint and parsley. So I'm just going to assume that it's ambiguous. I'm going to go ahead and apply the cut to everything there because it just makes a lot more sense than putting in a whole bouquet of parsley, for instance. Yep. Okay, and we're going to go with relatively fine. Actually, I do have a chef's knife, and they did have chef's knives. And I do have a replica chef's knife by Todd Cutler, but it's not here. Are you just randomly strumming now?
No, I don't know what these symbols mean on the thing, so I was wondering if it meant to strum.
Okay, so the recipe also doesn't say, even though it says chopped into pieces, little pieces, little pieces is not an official measurement. So this is another place where we, as the redactor, as the interpreter of the recipe, have to make the call. How small should they be? I personally think smaller is better in this case. I mean, not necessarily turned into powder or a paste, but you know, not to have big chunks. The other thing that's not mentioned is, of course, amounts. So this is the amount of paste that we have. I guess I could actually weigh this. Handsome, do we have any more of the little metal bowls?
Probably.
No, it's okay. Wait, I got it. I'll just use this one.
Oh, but I already stood up. Oh, stretch.
So we have 369 grams of paste. Right, so we have 369 grams of paste. It looks like about that much. So now we have to think, what ratio of apples to figs to herbs do we want? Because again, not a single measurement is provided, which is why I was so excited when the fine spice recipe actually gave us ounces and quarter ounces and quarter of a quarter ounces. So exciting, or half of a quarter ounce, so exciting. This one does not. So it's down to us. And it might, in fact, to a certain degree, have been down to the cook. You know, how much apple to fig to bean paste do you want to have? What about your spice or your herbs, right? So let's go ahead and think about this logically. This looks like, volumetrically speaking, and in this case, I think the volumetric part really matters, actually. You know, this looks like it's about a third of the bean paste to apple. So that's going to make our bean fritters relatively sweet, in fact. And you know what? I think we're just going to go with it. Let me find out how much apple this is. I actually have a notebook, so I need to be taking notes, honestly. Because you may have figured out already, but if you haven't, this is what we call this is the process of redaction. We are redacting an original medieval recipe, which means it is to a certain degree experimentation. This is experimental archaeology in a certain way, right? So we have here 81 grams of apple, 369 grams of paste, and 81 grams of apple. Chopped finely. Okay, next we have figs. Again, there is no indication as to how much figs, just that they should be chopped into small pieces. And these are drier than they maybe should be, because I've had these for a while and it's very dry here in Korea for most of the year. So I maybe should have considered rehydrating these. I'm going to give them I think I'm going to actually chop them and then I'm going to soak them in a little bit of water while we figure out the rest of the stuff. So this is...
The apple will add moisture. Say hi to Thomas.
It will. Thomas, welcome. Thank you. Thomas Raybender, Thomas?
Haley.
Oh, Thomas Haley, welcome. Thank you for joining us. The apples will add some moisture, but not enough moisture to counter. These are super dry figs. These are extra desiccated. So they need to be a little moister than they are. They're definitely. So we've got 37 grams there. Question is, do I think that's enough? I think I'll go with 3. We'll go with 3 of these bad boys, which would make it 52 grams of figs. I'm going to chop them and then I'm just going to let them steep in a little bit of warm water while we... Oh, yeah. You should... Even with a dried fig, you shouldn't have to press down hard with your knife. They need to be... They're going to get a little bit of moisturizing assistance here in a moment. Oh, goodness. And then our next consideration is going to be our herbis, our herbs. Now, the nice thing about this recipe, ladies and gentlemen, is that you will actually be able to see the final product, because unlike something that bakes in an oven for a long time, this will be done in the middle of by the end of the stream. We will have a finished fritter, unless something goes hideously, hideously awry, which it could. I never discount those sorts of unfortunate occurrences. Okay. Yeah, it was nothing. Figs should never be that hard to cut with a very sharp knife. Put a little hot water on these to convince them to be more fig-like and less rock-like.
Oh, Husafel is here.
Oh, Husafel, thank you for joining us today.
Cash Baby says, love your dress.
Cash Baby, welcome back. Nice to see you.
Kambar Jafarai wrote in Arabic script of some kind. It says, what are you doing, eh?
Okay, well, for those just joining, welcome to my medieval cooking party. I am the creative Contessa. Today we are exploring 15th century Italian cuisine, specifically from Naples. Hence why I'm dressed like a 15th century lady from Italy. Okay, so let's talk about our herbs. So again, there were no measurements mentioned at all, no quantities mentioned for our herbs. And so I'm just going to pull out the parsley from my pile of herbs. Right, so we have here, it's a little wilted because it's a little dry. It sat in the fridge overnight, not wrapped up. So I'm just going to cut the stems away. Just so you know, with stems, parsley stems, they're pretty stringy, they're pretty woody, they're not very pleasant mouthfeel, but I save these in a bowl in my freezer where I keep all the offcuttings from vegetables and herbs, and then I use them to make stock. Really great way to add flavor to your stock without having to actually, eat the woody, stringy stem. Okay, so let's go ahead and give this away, even though they're a little drier, they're a little desiccated, so they don't weigh as much as they might normally have started out weighing. Let's see, 11 grams of fresh parsley. So this is just, I really like parsley, so this is just what we're going with. This might actually not be enough. I don't know. We'll find out at the end of the game whether we like the thing we've made or not. And this is part of the fun, but also maybe the agony and the ecstasy of medieval cookery, is that we never actually quite know if we have in fact made something that a 15th century Neapolitan person would actually recognize, right? We don't know. None of us, there's no traveling back in time, and we have very little other reference material that could inform how a dish like this should taste. So it really is, there's a lot of conjecture involved. We know that all the flavors are basically there, but in terms of texture and ratio of flavors, who knows? Who knows? Someday we'll find a 15th century cookbook where every recipe has everything carefully measured out. Someday. No, we won't. I despair of that ever happening, honestly. Okay, then we have fresh dill. Smells so nice. Looks like I'm going with looks like 5 grams of fresh dill. Let's see, and I've got some thyme here, and I'll measure it before I pull it off the stem, because that stem is woody.
Is rosemary in the recipe?
Yes, there will be some rosemary in this recipe.
I like tamarind.
I love tamarind. I can eat tamarind straight. I love unsweetened tamarind straight out of the pod. Love it. I eat it regularly. When I go to Thailand, I plan on buying more tamarind. Not sweetened. I like it sour.
For some reason it hid a message.
Right? What was the hidden message?
What are you cooking?
What are you cooking? Why would YouTube, why are you blocking messages like that? Welcome to my medieval cooking party. We are in 15th century Naples today. And we are making bean fritters. And we are currently preparing the herbs that will go into these fritters. I'm now stripping the thyme leaves from the stems. Thyme stems are definitely woody. You do not want those in your dish. Well, I guess unless you like chewing on wood. Okay, that sounds bad. Anyway, moving on, stripping leaves from the thyme.
We've not been to the Philippines yet.
We have not yet been to the Philippines.
We want to go.
It is on the list of places to visit. We just haven't been there yet. And then, of course, we have our mint. So this is apple mint. These are little leaves. An apple mint, it's just a kind of mint. Some people say it tastes slightly like apple. I haven't particularly noticed that, honestly. But this is a kind of mint that did grow that was native to, in fact, medieval Italy. So this is definitely a cultivar, a type of mint that could have been used in this recipe. A little bit of rosemary. And
PGE is on, and Sarah February is here as well.
Ooh, Sarah February, thank you for joining us. PGE, welcome.
Jean Juan Philip. I think that's my first time saying that on the chat.
Juan Philip, welcome to the community. Welcome to our medieval cooking party. Not a sewing party today. Today is definitely a cooking party.
Wow.
Apparently, I had some more parsley in the bowl. Well, it's going to get used anyway.
Star Puffs asks, what's the favorite herb you've used?
Favorite herb that oh, that's a good question. What's my favorite herb? I really love dill. It's got such a fresh smell. I guess it depends on what counts as an herb. My favorite green thing is actually from Korea. It's currently minari, water parsley, or water celery, it's sometimes called. But I do love dill. I definitely love dill. I love a good parsley mint dill combination. That for me is a real winning combo. Trying to think of any exotic herbs that I particularly. Summer savory is really nice. I think summer savory deserves a bigger place in our kitchens in general. It's a very new, textured, nuanced, contains a multitude of flavors and smells. And again, the recipe doesn't really talk about how to chop the herbs, but I'm going to just go with really fine.
Sarah February asked, besides fruit and vegetables, what spices and herbs were part of the Columbian exchange?
What fruits and vegetables? No.
Besides
Right.
Spices.
Yeah, spices. So vanilla was big part of the Columbian exchange. Vanilla is from Mexico originally, and vanilla comes from a specific kind of orchid, and that kind of orchid, until someone figured out artificial orchid insemination, basically, that kind of orchid was only pollinated by one specific kind of bee that lived in the Yucatan Peninsula, right? So yeah, vanilla, big part of that Columbian exchange. Chocolate is obviously a big part of the Columbian exchange from the Americas to Eurafrica, Asia. Let's see, other spices. Cumin went the other way. Cumin and limes and lemons went to the Americas. I consider limes and lemons spices in this case because they are major flavor givers. But cumin went to the Americas. If you can imagine Mexican cuisine without cumin. They didn't have pigs. There were no pigs either. So pork also, no pork lard. Let's see, other spices that were part of. So all of the cinnamon that was from Asia to Mexico. There was no cinnamon in Mexican cuisine before the Columbian exchange. Let me see, other spices that came that direction and went to Eurafrica, Asia, spices specifically. Mostly the ones that top chili peppers, which are a spice, right? Paprika comes from chili peppers. That's a big one, right? Okay, so I'm actually going to put these chopped herbs in with the apples. And this is another thing. Very often medieval recipes do not give you mixing instructions, by which I mean they talk about just tossing everything in a bowl, but that doesn't mean that's how they actually did it. Again, I really do feel like a medieval cook would have known, well, you mix your dry ingredients together first, you mix your wet ingredients together, and then you mix them together, for instance. They just didn't feel the need to specify that in parchment with scribes because, of course, that's expensive. Parchment is expensive, vellum, parchment, animal skin for writing materials is expensive, ink is expensive, scribes are expensive. So I really feel a lot of these recipes are as minimalist as they are because of cost, right? And also an acknowledgement that everyone knows. Anyone who reads this recipe already knows how to cook. They're going to know to put in, chop your herbs together and then mix it in with your apples, for instance. So these are other assumptions we have to make as a modern cook. Okay, looking back at our recipe. Get broad bean paste, enough for the amount of fritter that you want to make. Check. Get your herbs, chopped figs, apples, mix everything together and fry it in oil. Okay.
Thank you, Arrowman 100.
Oh, thank you, Arrowman 100.
Do you see it?
No, I can't.
$20
Oh, wow.
super chat.
Thank you for that $20 super chat. That is awesome, Arrowman. Really appreciate that.
1999.
Whatever. 1999, whatever. Thank you, Arrowman. Really super appreciate that.
Let's see here. Other comments at the moment?
Yes.
I'm John 14, and I'm a huge fan. This is my first time watching it live.
Oh, welcome, John. Thank you for joining us. Glad you could make a live stream.
Sarah says, wow, cumin is ubiquitous with Indian cuisine. Can't imagine it without it.
Yeah. Oh, no. So
Cumin went the other way.
cumin went the other way. Cumin went from Asia, from Asia and Europe to the Americas. Yeah. No, so going to the Americas, almost all spices went that way. The spices I can think of that came from the Americas were chili peppers, which paprika comes from that, chocolate, vanilla. Those are the spices that went from the Americas to Eurafrica, Asia.
Okay, paprika.
Yeah, paprika
Comes from dried.
comes from the
ground
skin.
bell
Yeah.
peppers.
Yeah. Paprika.
Those come from Americas.
Yeah. Paprika comes from the skin of dried bell peppers. And that comes from originally all peppers, all chili peppers. I repeat, all chili peppers are from the Americas. They're from Mesoamerica. No one in Africa, no one in Asia, no one in Europe had any kind of chili pepper, bell pepper based anything until the 16th century. And even then it didn't get uptake until the 18th century in most places, because in most places, a couple of exceptions, Spain and Hungary, interestingly, were exceptions to that. They did uptake peppers before everyone else. And that's why paprika is so common in a lot of Spanish dishes and a lot of Hungarian dishes. But no, that's not medieval, post-medieval, everyone, post-Columbian exchange. Okay, here, oh my gosh. I wish I could convey the really beautiful, clean green smell here, because you've got the apples and you have our herbs. And to recap, I couldn't get chervil. So I've substituted a couple of other different herbs that I do have that would also have been available in 15th century Italy. So we have used rosemary, dill, parsley, thyme, and mint to create a nice herb blend. And it just, with the apples especially, it makes such a really wonderful, can you smell sweet? I can smell sweet. Am I the only one who can smell sweet? I can smell sweet. So I can smell this sweet. What's wrong with my brain? I can smell this sweet with the herbs. So yeah, handsome.
I can't pronounce their name. Waurchai, maybe? Sent girl power for 300 joules.
Ooh, thank you for that girl power. Appreciate that. Waurchai. What language?
I'm not sure.
I mean, what alphabet?
English.
Oh, okay.
Waurchei.
Okay. Waurche, maybe? Thank you for that. I apologize for mispronouncing your name. Normally, I'm very good with name pronunciations if I can recognize the language from which it originates.
And I put this one through. Rusty says, "I churn your butter anytime." We don't have a butter churn, so
I'm
makes it
so
difficult.
sorry, everyone. A butter churn is one of the things we are actually trying to get so we can demonstrate churning butter in the Middle Ages. Drink, everyone. Someone asked if they could churn my butter. No Amish comments this time?
Oh, we've already drank for those.
Oh, we already drank for those? Okay. Okay, so here are our hydrated, hopefully somewhat hydrated figs, and I'm just gonna add those in. Oh, right, and I did say I was going to add a little bit of the dried sage because I wasn't able to procure fresh sage. Now remember, when you are substituting, if you are substituting dried herbs for fresh herbs, the difference in quantity is going to be exponential because dried herbs, I mean, leaves are really like massive percentage of water. I'm not even going to make up a percentage, but leaves are very watery. And so when you remove the water and you grind it, the difference in volume is massive. So keep that in mind. Do not substitute 1 gram of fresh sage for 1 gram of dried sage. You will hate your life. You will hate the thing you're eating, probably. Yes, Hanson.
That pepper fact makes more sense why people say white people can't handle spice. That's kind of funny.
Yeah, well, so the reality is that if chili peppers had become as popular in Europe as they did in Asia, then we would have developed a resistance for it as well. But they just didn't. It did not please Europeans' palates when the peppers were first making the rounds. So for the first 100 years of peppers and tomatoes being in Europe, more or less they were decorative. They were ornamental plants, actually. I mean, imagine it, like beautiful chili pepper, little tiny chili peppers, all beautiful and shiny, bright colors. I mean, that's really pretty. And depending on the conditions, they're apparently perennial. If it's the right conditions, they'll just keep going. So, you've got these, and tomatoes, they're beautiful, right? And they come in different colors, at least they used to before we standardized them and homogenized them into monoculture. So they'd actually have decorative tomato and decorative pepper plants around, but they didn't think they could eat them. First off, the peppers were mean. Those chili peppers that first came from Mesoamerica were just mean. And it took some selective breeding to turn them into bell peppers. That didn't happen instantly. They didn't come like bell peppers. That was a, selective breeding thing that eventually happened. So, chili peppers were mean, and tomatoes, well, tomatoes were acidic.
Good night, Ursula.
Good night, Ursula. Thank you for joining us. Chat later. Tomatoes are acidic. And unfortunately, in pre-modern Europe, I mean, pre-today Europe, pre-20th century Europe, not even modern, because the 16th century is the modern era, they would actually, most people had pewter tableware. Most people, pewter tableware. Pewter is a metal alloy that contained lead. It always contained lead in this era. And so when you put acidic tomatoes on pewter, then the acid actually leaches the lead out and puts it in the food stuff that you're eating. And so people were dying. The first several bunches of people to try tomatoes got lead poisoning and died. So that made people decide that they shouldn't eat the tomatoes. It took like a century or more to figure out that actually it was okay. And I think it happened, one of the theories is that it was a bunch of starving peasants in Spain who were so hungry that they ate the tomatoes that were growing in a trash heap, basically, that had been tossed out, and they didn't die. Like that's that's possibly apocryphal. I haven't actually seen any backing for that. It's one of those theories. Okay, so let's go ahead and mix up. Here's our bean mash. Here is the filling that's to go into it. Now, here's the interesting thing. What this doesn't say also is whether this should be for multiple fritters, what size they should be, because the original recipe says get enough bean paste for the size of the fritter that you want. And there's actually one of the interpretations of this could be that you're actually making an omelet, like one big thing. So you, as the redactor, as the creative cook, get to decide whether you will make individual fritters that are more single serving size, or a giant family size fritter that can then be like tortilla, for instance. Tortilla de patatas can then be, cut up into slices and served. It's unclear, right? But from the language, get enough bean paste for the size of the fritter, singular, that you want to make. It seems like it's something you could decide yourself, right? You could decide to have lots of fritters, smaller fritters, or you could decide to make one big family size fritter. Especially if you're cooking for a camp, I know which one I would do. Big family size fritter for the win. So streamline that production process 100%. Okay, and then it says to fry them in oil. So the kinds of oils that would have been available in Italy, in Naples specifically, in this era, they could have had lard, they could have had tallow, rendered beef fat, or rendered sheep's fat, rendered goat fat. They could have had, the goat fat is probably less likely. Sheep, though, slightly more likely. They had olive oil for certain. So those are the kinds of oils that they could have used for frying this in.
Great question on here. Are you ready?
I can't read anything, handsome.
No, when you're ready.
Oh, when I'm ready. Okay. So I've decided to go today with tallow because I have a bunch of that. Yeah. And olive oil is really expensive. Okay, handsome, what's the question?
Best modernly available apples that mimic apples from this era.
Jesus.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a hard question.
Crab apples.
Crab apples. I do not have an answer for that because I have never lived in a place where I had the kind of apple selection where I could even look into that. My expertise is not apple cultivars. I will fully admit that. I do know though that medieval apples were not as sweet as the modern ones are, and they weren't as big as the modern ones are. So, I would say look for an heirloom cultivar. Go to your local co-op, even go to a local, if you have a local apple orchard. What's available would depend really highly on where you live. Like we're currently in South Korea, so we only have apple cultivars that are available here. And as far as I know, as far as I understand, apples were introduced here by the missionaries at the end of the 19th century. So as far as I know. So yeah, the apples here might actually therefore be an older cultivar. I didn't think about that. That might make the apples here an older cultivar of apple than the ones you can get in the US these days generally. Huh, I never thought about that.
Crab apples would be a close cousin to period apples.
Yeah, I've often wondered too if crab apples would be. I think in this dish though, I think the assumption is that the apples are at least lightly sweet, not the kind of apples that will make your face draw in. Although I do love a good sour apple. I can eat sour apples straight from the tree, no problem. I think because of the combination of sweet and savory from the figs, I do feel like the apples should be at least a little bit sweet. But definitely don't go for like the grape apples that taste like grapes weirdly and that are so sweet that they would make a diabetic crash even without eating them. So, am I the only one who saves the apple peels and eats them separately? Just wondering for a friend. Okay. It smells really nice. Really does. So the thing we have to be concerned about here is the dryness or wetness of our bean paste. And again, obviously, they would have known how wet the bean paste should be because they would have made these a lot. And the bean paste maker would have also known. Now, what's interesting here, I have, as a consequence of trying to rehydrate those super desiccated figs, I actually have a little bit of fig water here. So I could, and it's sweet. So if I wanted to, if I needed to rehydrate this, if I see that it's drying out, then I could absolutely use that fig water, which would sweeten it, which would definitely, that would be something they would hypothetically do in terms of not wasting. But I haven't found evidence of soaking the figs and then using the fig water for something else in a recipe from this era, just to be clear. Okay, there is our mash. So I'm not going to make one, I'm going to make more than one out of this. I'm not going to make just one, but I think I might do just two big ones. Let me show you the clay pot in which we're going to be doing this. This is a traditional Korean clay cooking pot, but it mimics very closely and looks in some cases almost exactly like some of its 15th century Italian cousins. So I do have actual replica medieval cookware in storage in the United States, but we're currently in Korea. So this is what I have to mimic that. I also don't have a medieval hearth. Medieval hearths were nothing like this. This kind of stove isn't invented until the 19th century, the end of the 19th century, by the way. They had heating stoves, but in terms of cooking with an oven and everything, yeah, this is a very late invention. So the medieval hearth would literally be either just a spot on the ground with a chimney over it, sometimes with a hole in the ceiling. Or if you were lucky, then it was a raised brick platform on top of which you would build your fire for your various cooking stations. And you would have a fire specifically for this kind of dish and a fire over there for that kind of dish. So a hearth in the medieval period could be relatively small if you lived in a small home, or in one of these big industrial kitchens in palaces or castles, could be really huge. And in Ronneburg Castle in Germany, they still have their 15th century kitchen. So you can actually see what a 15th century kitchen was like. And literally the ceiling of the kitchen is just a chimney piece. The whole ceiling vents up into a chimney. It's, yeah. So I guess it was their attempt at, installing a chimney, because chimneys are a relatively recent invention too in the history of the West. Anyway, so we're going to be using this for our fritter, and I'm going to go ahead and add our fat to it. And it doesn't say whether this should be deep fried or shallow fried. I'm going to go with shallow fried because the way this is, I just don't think it would work as well as a deep fried thing. I think it's probably shallow fried. By which I mean somewhere between what some of you might consider shallow frying and what is actually deep frying, right? So putting about that much of the tallow into it. And let me clean up this space a little bit here.
And while you do that, Mac Power sent you 10 joules.
Ooh, thank you for that gift. Appreciate that, Max. Appreciate that, Max. Thank you for those joules.
They also say hello, as well as Pumpkin Spice, Bendejo, Lunar X, and Nightly Night Owl.
Have all joined us?
They've all said hello. It looks wonderful.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for those compliments. If you have any questions about medieval daily life in the Middle Ages, about medieval food, about medieval clothing, just let me know in the comments. Okay, so I think I noted everything down.
Laura Chase said hi again as well.
Laura Chase said hi?
That one I couldn't pronounce her.
Oh, okay.
Warche
said hi. Hello, Warche. Thank you for joining us. Okay, 3 figs. 3 figs and 81 grams of apples and that spice, that herb blend. Okay, let's see what happens. Where did the spice blend go? Uh-oh. Oh, there it is. I thought I accidentally mixed all the spices into the bean paste. So at the end, we will be sprinkling this lovely combination on top of it.
2 more joules.
2 more joules. Appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Hand's best friend.
Okay. So unlike my medieval forebears who would have had to start a fire with a flint and steel, which I at one point could do, although I'm really rusty and it would take a little bit of time probably, we're just going to be using the modern stove here. Yeah.
Just messing that up this time.
Petite Rien.
Yeah. See, you can tell it's not AI. I'm screwing.
How to tell I'm not AI. I drop occasional colorful words and my music occasionally messes up. Mistakes are made, as it were. Yeah, if you're enjoying this live stream, don't forget to double tap that screen, everyone, and consider subscribing. And so apples here are so big. This apple was just, look how big this apple was. Also, this fruit is very expensive in Korea, which actually reflects the status of fruit in the Middle Ages. fruit was also considered a delicacy. It was not, yes, it grew on trees, but not all fruit that grew on trees was the good kind that you would want to eat, right? And it only grew on trees in a specific season. And a lot of those trees were owned by people. So fruit, depending on where you were and when you were in medieval Europe, could be an extreme delicacy. Lemons and oranges, for example, not so much of a delicacy in the Mediterranean, big delicacy in England in this era, right? So, you know, your mileage will vary. Europe is not a monolith across the 1,000 years of the history that is the Middle Ages, nor is it a monolith across the entire continent. Okay, we're just heating up our oil. The interesting thing about this recipe is that many deep fried thing recipes do actually involve a batter of some kind, but this one does not, which is why this definitely feels more like a vegan omelet than a fritter necessarily. But it smells really good. I wish I could communicate the smell to you. It just smells really nice. And I'm excited about the combination of herbs plus the apple and the figs with the relatively neutral palate of the broad beans. For those who are wondering, do we have any broad beans left? So broad beans basically can come in two kinds. You can have green fava beans, which are fresh. Those are the best, honestly, but you can only get those one time of year, and that's when they can literally be pulled off of the plant fresh in their pods. That's really when they're more like a vegetable and before they become more like a pulse, sort of like the difference between edamame and soybeans, right? Edamame are the green, fresh version of soybeans when they're still basically like a vegetable before they've aged into a pulse, which has different micronutrient and macronutrient properties. So this is what dried fava beans look like. And you'll notice there's a big color difference. And that's because there's a brown skin, a thick brown skin on these. So you have to soak them I usually soak them overnight. And then you have to peel them to get this skin off. And then you get the yellow inside. We did that beforehand because I didn't want to spend 4 hours on this cooking show, because I can't, because I do have, as I said, my traditional Korean painting class later this afternoon. So yes, if you buy fava beans and they're dry, they will come like this. Most likely they will come like this. You'll have to peel them yourselves after you soak them. Yes.
Ronald Gilchrist said, I liked and subscribed, which is a good segue into saying like and subscribe.
Yes, I just did. Thank you, Ronald. Yes, Ronald, thank you for liking and subscribing. Appreciate it. Welcome to the community. And those of you who might have not done this yet, double tap your screen and consider subscribing. And also, if you would like access to extras and perks and also to support my living history work, then consider becoming a patron on Patreon or a channel member or a Facebook subscriber, I think it is. Of all of those, I would say that probably the Patreon members get the most perks. And that comes with access to my Creative Contessa Discord server, where I share extra resources and we have really fun conversations, and you can actually interact with me and the community directly. It's a beautiful place. We're very polite, good, healthy discourse. People disagree and they disagree respectfully. It's so wonderful. But also channel members and patrons get access to extra footage, tutorials, videos, uncut getting dressed videos where my damsels and my musician and I are saying the most outrageous things that the public never gets to see. Dozens of hours of all tutorials and high quality content that is only for my generous supporters. So if you'd like access to those extra perks, do consider becoming a patron on Patreon or a channel member.
Was there diabetes in the Middle Ages?
Yes. Was there diabetes in the Middle East? Yes, it was called the sugar disease. No, sorry. What was it called? Oh, damn it. Sweet urine. Something to do. The actual expression went out of my head. But if your urine tasted sweet, they knew you had diabetes. And probably you're going to say, wait, what? Tasted sweet? Yes, you heard me right. So one of the primary diagnostic methods in the medieval world was actually a pretty accurate one if the physician was well trained. Urinalysis is not a new concept. But the way they analyze the urine might not please many of the modern physicians, because they would gauge the urine by sight. they would compare it against a urine color wheel that actually told you if your urine is this color, then they're probably suffering from this issue. They would also taste it. And I know many of you are probably feeling truly horrified, but I've talked to medical professionals who actually sometimes still do this. And they're actually sometimes trained to still do this, especially in developing countries where they don't have access to urinalysis equipment. So if they tasted your urine and it was sweet, they knew that you had diabetes. But people with diabetes in the Middle Ages didn't live long. It was fatal. It was nearly always fatal. And it was much less common, much less common, especially type 2 diabetes was much less common because they just didn't have all the super refined carbohydrates that we have now. They didn't have corn syrup. They didn't sugar in medieval Europe. Well, that was something that only the extremely wealthy could afford. And even they didn't need it in large quantities. So yeah. Okay, so for our fritter, that's a great question. Thank you for asking. I'll get to more on that in a minute, but our oil is looking like it's thinking about getting hot, so I thought I'd show you what I'm going to assume is what we should be making this into. Again, the original recipe doesn't say. It just says mix it all together and fry it in oil. Yay. So I'm going to go with a patty about this big, and it's about a ½ inch thick, like 1.5 centimeters thick ish, 1 to 1.5 centimeters thick, ½ inch-ish thick, right? And it's pretty round because it's our pot is round, and round is definitely seems to be the natural shape for fritters in the world. So to test your oil, there's a couple of ways to test the heat of your oil. Sometimes without a thermometer. Sometimes there's certain techniques for actually putting little slips of paper in it. Sometimes a little bit of bread, like old bread, and seeing how quickly it fries and how quickly it turns brown. I'm going to cheat today because I don't feel like burning myself possibly, and we're going to use a thermometer. Because you really do want your oil to be hot, but if your oil is too hot, then you're not going to be happy with the results. I don't know where any of the thermometers are. Great.
Is it not cooked to the side of the...
Oh, there's one over here, but we have more, but that's okay. Okay, so I'm just going to cheat and use a thermometer, but you can, I will be honest, I don't do a lot of shallow frying or deep frying. I do mostly sauteing. So I don't have quite as refined an eye when it comes to visually gauging the temperature of the oil. But a lot of people who deep fry a lot, they can actually gauge the oil's temperature based on its behavior in the pot. Seriously. I can gauge oil's behavior, its temperature based on its behavior in a pan. Just when it gets this deep, those properties, that behavior changes a little bit. So let's see. Okay, well, that's definitely hot enough. You never, ever want your oil to be too cool, because if it's cool, then it's going to absorb, it'll be very greasy, right? And you know what? I'm going to be smart. We're going to do a test piece. Look at me. I'm so clever. I didn't get lost in talking to you all this time, which sometimes happens in these cooking things. Cheater, absolutely. Lean into the cheat. Okay, I'm just going to do a little test one. We're going to see what happens. Also, you always want to make sure you vent when you're doing anything with oil because the fumes are carcinogenic. Yeah. It's really sizzling. I don't know if you can hear it or not. Well, it basically cooked it. It actually all broke apart entirely into its constituent pieces. There is no fritter left. It literally dissolved the fritter part of the fritter. That's interesting. That is interesting. I was not anticipating that happening. Okay. Well, maybe there needs to be more bean.
Gazpacho says add egg. Did you miss
Says what?
Add egg.
Oh no, definitely no egg. This is a Lenten dish. It is not supposed to have egg. It is supposed to be just beans. We're going based on the medieval recipe. And it could be that maybe it's not supposed to be deep fried. Well, I'll try with another one. And then I will empty a whole bunch of the oil out and we'll go for less oil in the pan. There's about an inch of oil in there right now. So maybe it's too much oil. Welcome to the experimental phase. Yep, it is. It is. The oil is so. Yep, the oil is so. It's so vivacious that it is. I can watch it literally bubbling pieces off of the fritter. Okay, so we're gonna go with a more shallow approach. We're going to make this less profound.
Gazpacho also offers cook it on a lower temperature and asks, is this gluten-free?
It is gluten-free.
Red Australia also seems to go shallow fry.
Yep, going with a shallow fry. Yep, this is absolutely a gluten-free dish. So this would be something that would be suitable for. This would be something that would be suitable for people who are celiac, honestly. If you prepare this in a celiac approved kitchen or a celiac certified kitchen, this would be gluten-free. It's got nothing in it to bind it, which is part of the problem. So yeah, we're definitely going with shallow fry this time. Shallow fry it is. And also, I'm going to put this on the back burner. The front burners are very strong and don't do well on low temperature. Yeah. Okay. Well, that was, and see, but you know, honestly, for me, half of the fun is the experiment, right? If everything just went perfectly all the time, then where would be the fun in that? You know what I mean? So definitely come along for the ride. You know, if I just wanted to demonstrate cooking in general, then I've got recipes I've already redacted. But with you all, with this particular, point of this particular medieval cooking party is that I'm exploring recipes I've never tried before. So, you know, lots of experimentation. The adventure is the fun for me. It's always been the best part of it. Okay. Going to try again. Deep fried fig is pretty tasty though. Well, at least I know that the combination is good. It tastes good. The flavors are nice. It would just be nice if they stayed together instead of slowly peeling apart bit by bit. But it could also be a sign. I should have gone about this a little bit differently. I should have actually set aside some unused bean mash so that I could add more bean mash in as we go with this experiment. So it could be a sign that my ratio of mashed bean to other ingredients is too high. For example, I think that the apples are actually leading to they're creating weak spots where the natural adhesive properties that bean mashes can have just aren't applying. So, yeah, sort of like in sourdough bread, if you actually add seeds to it, then it actually prevents the gluten from forming because the seeds literally block the gluten structure, and so your bread will not be as fluffy. There's other ways you have to add the seeds in, like at the very last minute. Otherwise, then the gluten won't form and you won't get that big puff that you want from your sourdough bread generally. Same idea, I feel like.
Are you Amish?
Am I Amish? I'm not Amish. I am not Amish. I am dressed as a 15th century Italian noblewoman cooking in her kitchen. And yeah, so this is not Amish. There's a lot of ways you can tell I'm not Amish. Low neckline, beautiful rich fabric, lots of it, jewelry. Yeah, no, this head covering is a 15th century kerchief. It's actually its origin. And most Amish people, the traditional Amish, the conventional head covering that Amish women wear is more like a little bonnet cap type thing. Okay, let's see. I don't know if you can see this or not. I was talking to you all, not paying attention, and the oil got a little too hot. Well, at least it's not completely falling apart this time. Mostly because there's not enough oil to actually literally carry it away from itself. This is tallow. Yeah, tallow is rendered beef fat.
Oh, I thought you were using the other stuff.
Shh. It's rendered beef fat. Yeah. Okay. The other problem with my stove is that it actually leans forward, so all of the oil is moving towards the front, so it's not actually evenly distributed. That's fun. No, it does not want to adhere together, not even in the shallow frying. Nope, it does not want to adhere together even in the shallow frying. Interesting. So I might actually, therefore, need to make more bean mash and lower the ratio of apples and other things to bean paste. I might have been way too generous with the apples in this particular concoction. Yeah, because that did not, yeah, it didn't go well. I'll just put it that way. Yep, well, we might call it there. I might have to follow up. I might therefore have to follow up by making some more bean mash and mixing that in and see if that creates better adhesion. But no, I will not be adding an egg because the recipe is specifically supposed to be for Lenten, for a Lenten application. So yeah, I think, unfortunately, we definitely don't have time for me to make more bean mash right now. That's on me though. I should have known better. Now I could try, it's a question of how much I want to waste food. I could try to, it could be a question of the small ones just aren't, it's not working, and that's why they're looking at this more of as an omelet. And so maybe having one big one might work better because its sheer mass will hold itself together. Handsome, have you looked at the comments lately? Because I can't see them. Yep, so I might, that's a possible route I could take. I need to.
Home Depot's here.
There are no Home Depots here, guys. We're in South Korea, in case you weren't tracking.
Somewhere else.
I'm sorry, what?
We'll have to find wood shims from somewhere else to try and get this.
Oh, wood shims, yeah. Well, this was not supposed to be a long-term solution, but anyway. Wipe this out because there was some burning that happened because the oil shifted forward, exposing the back.
No, atomic is definitely
Not Amish. Not Amish. Drink, everyone. Drink. Still not Amish. Still not Amish.
I can tell I'm doing better.
You are doing better. You're doing much better.
All these are from that one book that I can't play from.
Nice.
안녕하세요.
안녕하세요. 어서 오세요. Okay. We're gonna give it a try. I've decided. We're gonna do it. We're going to do We're gonna try the big one in even less oil, and we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. And if it doesn't work with that one, then I'm going to save the rest and we're going to make more bean mash and we'll add that in. Yep. Welcome to those just joining. Welcome to my medieval cooking party. Today we are back in 15th century Italy. We are in Naples and we're at the court of King Ferrante and exploring recipes that would have been enjoyed in the great banquets that were once held in that amazing castle that actually now is there at the harbor in Naples. You can see it if you cruise into Naples and you exit the cruise ship, nearly always you can see the castle right from the port. So we're actually making something called basically it's actually referred to as broad beans in a frying pan. It's a bean fritter, and it's supposed to be a Lenten dish, a dish that you can eat during one of the 130 plus days a year when medieval Christians were supposed to fast, which means they were supposed to avoid meat, they were supposed to avoid eggs, they were supposed to avoid cheese. Good night, Tom McCord. Thank you for joining us. Chat later.
Ash Baby says her brain is like a medieval library. It's so calming.
Appreciate the compliment.
Go the healthy way, less oil.
Yeah, go the healthy way, less oil. But let me tell you, medieval people loved their dough fried in oil. They loved it, loved it, loved it, loved it. There are so many fritter recipes that have survived from the Middle Ages. It was very clearly a staple of their diet. It was, yeah. Okay.
I'm almost out of fingertips.
You're almost out of fingertips.
Do my 12th century stuff for another minute.
Yeah, so my condottiero has been adding to his lute repertory lately, and I'm very, very happy because he started exploring some really, some staples of the courtly romance world. He's picked up a tune that was composed, a tune and song, that was composed by Richard the Lionheart, the absentee king of England, during one of his several times in captivity. Let me see. Jeanne nous en prie is the name of the song, written at the end of the 12th century and has survived, and it's been arranged for lute. And so he's been learning that, and it's a really beautiful tune. And he's also been learning a 15th century pop tune from the Burgundian court, Ma Douce Dame Jolie, by Machaut, one of the rock stars of the Burgundian music scene in the 15th century. So really happy these have been added to the repertory. The other ones were more folk tune-ish and not really worthy of me. He's not listening. He's ignoring me studiously. Okay, well, at the very least, it's not dissolving instantly, so that's good. I'm actually going to cover it. See if that, cover it lightly. See what that does. It's not, you know, the thing is, so the thing about this fritter is that there is nothing in it to cook. What I mean is there's very little in here that's going to coagulate. Right, so what needs to happen is it needs to basically dry out enough that it binds together, because there's no eggs. There are some kinds of some of the proteins in fava beans will coagulate under the right circumstances. That's what protein does when you cook it. The protein strands actually bind up more tightly around themselves, so the meat actually binds together under the application of heat. Eggs obviously are the same way. That's why eggs are used as a binder in a lot of things where they might not otherwise bind. But like I said, this recipe, it's supposed to be Lenten. It's not supposed to, we're not supposed to have to cheat and use eggs, supposedly. So let's see, what else has been going on in the world? Oh, I produced a video on art history that has turned a short video, mind you, on why the Virgin Mary's cloak, which is a synonym for the word mantle, for those who are wondering. See the comments under that video if you want to know why I'm using that particular inflection. Anyway, this video was not intended to be political. It wasn't intended to be an observation about the expenditures of the ultra wealthy. Not in the least. I didn't mean for any of that to be implied by this video. And yet, this video, which was about art history and why we now see the most common depiction of the Virgin Mary is in a blue mantle, then how that ties back to luxurious, conspicuous consumption in artwork in the Middle Ages. That has become a whole politicized video. I don't even know. I thought I was just putting out there some fun art history that connects the modern world to the medieval one, but apparently I was naive to think that that's how that would be interpreted. Yeah. You can check that short out later if you like, or if you're bored with this medieval cooking party, go check it out now. I published it just a couple of days ago. I think it's called Why the Virgin Mary Wears a Blue Cloak or something like that. Two of the comments were, it's a mantle, not a cloak, whereby I have to give them an etymology lesson and tell them that cloak and mantle are synonymous, and that in many depictions, the Virgin Mary in the Middle Ages is actually in fact wearing a cloak with a clasp around her neck, with an actual brooch. It's not a mantle, but mantle and cloak, they're synonymous. Mantle is the word that comes from Latin that has been entered English in like the 6th century, the 5th or 6th century from Latin. And then cloak is just another word that entered later from a different direction, but they were all used for basically the same garment for a long time. Yeah. Okay, let's see how we're going. Well, it's definitely not completely, it hasn't really cohered as a result of cooking thus far. And the edges, the apples on the edges are definitely still frittering away. I wonder if that's where that expression comes from, to fritter something away. Does it come from fritters dissolving in the oil when they're not made in exactly the right way? I never thought about that. Huh, well, the apples are frittering away that are on the edges. Yep, they're just dissolving right away. And it's basically just mash. Yeah, it's a mash that just does not want to cohere. Very interesting. Okay, well, and lower heat, the problem with lower heat is that it's just kind of absorbing the oil. So, well, everyone, I think that means that the next thing to do is actually, and trust me, I accidentally bought like 30 pounds of dried fava beans. No, I'm not exaggerating. I mistook the quantity in the order when I ordered them online from Coupang here in Korea. So I think the thing to do here is actually to make some more bean mash, just plain bean mash, and mix that in with the clearly overly appley mixture and see if we can convince it to cohere better. I think that's probably what we're going to do. Comments, Hanson?
Nevis is on.
Nevis, wow, Nevis, it's late where you are, isn't it?
Applesauce is a beaded binder, and I think existed in the Middle Ages.
No. So here's the thing. No, I'm trying to stick to the recipe, and the recipe is very basic. The recipe has bean paste, it has the fresh herbs, and it has apples and figs added to it. Now, maybe the apples were dried, but it doesn't say. Figs are nearly always dried. So there's no eggs, there's no other binder. So I'm trying to stick to the recipe as it's provided, because this isn't the only one that's like this. There are a lot of bean fritter recipes in medieval sources that are like this, that don't have binders like eggs, and definitely not applesauce, but chopped apples, right? So I'm trying to stick to that. Yep, so we'll see. But it's interesting because it is the apples that are literally frittering away in the pan. So here, I'll show you, let me see if I can lift this over to the camera without injuring myself in a scarification manner. Okay, so this is what happened when I turned it over. It was mush, basically. You know, I kind of patted it back into a patty shape, but it was just basically like mashed potatoes, but with beans. It smells good. I dare say it might even taste good, but it's definitely not very fritter-like. Definitely not very fritter-like. So yeah, I think we're going to up the ratio of bean to everything else. And I mean, if you look at it, honestly, the apples they are a pretty large component of it. So I could see how that would interfere with the coherence of the beans. Yeah. But as I said, not all experiments in historical cookery are going to result in success, and that's not the point. The point is to maybe ultimately try to be successful. A front is passing, there's a lot of wind. To try to be successful, but for me, half the fun is the journey. Okay, everyone, are there any questions? Have you been keeping an eye on the time?
Yeah, it's 12:45.
Oh, okay, great, perfect. Okay, well, are there any questions, everyone? Any final questions? I'll keep you apprised of the progress. I'll make some community posts and Facebook posts about what happened, and if I actually have the time this week to make more bean paste and try it again, we will see. Yep. Okay, otherwise, I would like to thank my channel members and my patrons and my Facebook subscribers for supporting my living history work and my endeavors to share the joys, the agonies, and the ecstasies of daily life in the Middle Ages with you through primary source research and experimentation. If you've been watching and you've been enjoying, double tap that screen and consider subscribing. And, you know, as I said earlier, if you'd like access to those extra perks, consider becoming a patron or a channel member. I'd like to thank all of you who gave me super chats, who gave me the little gifts, the gems, all those little extra methods of remunerating me for my efforts. Money is tight these days for everyone and getting tighter, so I am really honored for those who are willing to share to support my work in this whole big endeavor that I've started. Otherwise, tomorrow we have medieval story time at about the same time that this one started. We're going to be going back to some primary chronicles from the era, people who lived in the Middle Ages writing about their own times, and records of things like trials and court cases. So we're going to be talking about crime and punishment, but from a primary source perspective, where I'll do readings from original texts, and then we'll talk about them together. And then on Wednesday morning will be a medieval sewing party. Unfortunately, Philip from Irish Medieval History will not be able to join us for the next 2 months, basically. He has other bigger obligations, and YouTube is not actually pushing his live streams at all, so he's not getting anything for them. So yeah, hopefully we'll see him back in July, maybe. Okay, Handsome, any final comments or questions?
Are you real?
I am real. I am real. This is not AI. This is not an AI background. It's actually a tapestry. I am real.
Let's see here. Nevis said assignments were due at midnight on Sundays, Lamau, so I finished a bit early today. Red Australia thinks the apple should have been stewed first into a puree, cooled, and then combined in the pate. Then possibly, but it doesn't say that in the...
It doesn't say that in the original. There's nothing about cooking or stewing the apples. I mean, that could be something we could do to fix it, but it might not reflect period practice, is my point, I guess. Like, there's a lot of fixes I could come up with to make it work, but I'm trying to make it work based on the instructions. Yeah, now 100% agree. Those are all options that I would do normally. Okay, other...
lots of thank yous and beautiful.
Okay, well, everyone, if you have time after the video posts, if you just leave a little emoji in the comments, not the live stream, but the comments, that's a great way to trigger the algorithm and support my channel. Otherwise, everyone, I hope to see you in one of my many live streams this week. And next week, or the end of this week, we're going to Thailand. So I will be bringing you some medieval sewing parties and medieval story times from historic parts of Chiang Mai in Thailand. So I hope to see you all there. Until next time, everyone, may your adventures in history be creative. Good night, everyone.